Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach and CPA bodybuilder. Today's guest is Braeden Miller. Braeden, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me on. It's a great opportunity to be here and chat a little bit with you this morning.
For sure, man. I'm excited to chop it up with you. It's always fun having coaches on the podcast / athletes because you kind of get some multiple perspectives. So I'm excited to kind of get in the coaching thing. Before we kind of get to that point, I'd like to know, Braeden, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
So definitely Jay and Dorian definitely sit up there. I like freaks, man, to be honest. I like the big boys. I was honestly a huge Dallas McCarver fan and been a big fan of Matt Jensen and stuff since it kind of came full circle. We ended up working together a little bit and he gave me some cool opportunities and stuff. So he's definitely helped me in my own right on the coaching side of things, which is pretty cool. But yeah, if I had to pinpoint three bodybuilders, I would say Dallas McCarver, Jay Cutler, and Dorian Yates for sure are my go-to. Rest in peace to Dallas.
Those are some big boys and some definitely some freaks, man. I absolutely love that. So second question here, just to kind of get our conversation going, Braeden. At what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
For sure. So I played competitive hockey my entire life. I played hockey for over 20 years. When I was in junior high, so I guess you guys call that middle school or whatever it's called down south there. So for me, that would have been grade 7. I went to a hockey academy school, actually. So I basically had school in the morning, and then the afternoon after lunch, we had hockey. So we were on ice 3 times a week and did kind of dry land training the other 2 days a week. So that's kind of was my first introduction to the gym. Definitely not bodybuilding style training, more hockey specific, power output, stuff like that. And I mean, we were super young, so we weren't doing nothing too crazy. But for me, that kind of turned into staying in the gym. I ended up hiring a personal trainer the year that I had been scouted to go move away and play junior. I hired him in the summer. And that completely changed my outlook on fitness. For me, it was like, I was a kid, I was young, I was in high school, I was partying, I was eating crappy foods or whatever, still training and playing hockey. And then that summer I had help with my diet and I focused on working with my trainer. We trained together 5 days a week. And I went into spring camp, the fastest, best in shape athlete I've ever been. And I just smoked their fitness test. And it was that reason I ended up moving away and playing junior hockey, was because I got myself in such good shape. Like I was never a super skilled guy. When it came to hockey, I just had hard work and worked out for me in that right. And I was like, wow, this fitness thing really changed my life. So that's when I kind of started diving into learning more about it. And I got some personal training certifications and stuff, because when you're playing junior hockey and you move away from home at 19 years old, your only obligations are literally show up at the rink once a day. And we were somewhat degenerates at that time, still partying and stuff, but it just fascinated me how much fitness had changed my life. So that's kind of where I got my feet wet with it. And then for the bodybuilding side of things, if you fast forward a little bit, like I had done that played junior for a few years. I ended up getting a pretty bad injury in the summer one year and didn't go back for my final season, but my coach actually had set something up for me where I got a scholarship to a university here where I live. And so I played university hockey for 2.5 seasons for them. And kind of during that phase was when I had transitioned to learning a little bit more bodybuilding style stuff, just, bodybuilding.com and whatnot. And I kind of had changed my own training because I just fell in love with the gym. And it was about halfway through my last season of playing university hockey where I was a captain on the team, and it just felt like I was kind of babysitting at that time. So for me, there was no more passion in that. It was just like, these guys don't care about hockey. My partying was done in junior. I care about the rest of my life. And honestly, the passion for hockey kind of had started to fade because of that. So I just told my coach, like, listen, I can't do this anymore, man. So once I had actually kind of stepped away from hockey, being somebody who was so competitive my entire life and played at the hockey at the highest level, I didn't know what to do. I had all this time and this competitive drive in me, but there was just nothing satisfying it. So one of my best friends that I grew up with was doing his first men's physique show, and I went to support him, and went to watch the show, and basically went to the show and was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. This is 100% what I'm going to do. So him and I trained together a little bit. I ended up hiring his coach, and from there it just steamrolled for me. I did my first show. I think it was about 9 months after that, which I ended up getting a win as a light heavyweight weighing in kind of at the low end of the cap. And that just kind of snowballed into a couple more wins, getting on a national stage and whatnot, which eventually transitioned to me kind of pulling back from competing due to a pretty serious health scare that I had per se, and we can dive into that if you'd like to. And that is actually what led me to the coaching side of things, because I've always been, I like to say, a nerd for this kind of stuff, and I'm just fascinated by a lot of this stuff. And even when I was in university, like I was sitting in class listening, but I wasn't paying attention. I was researching stuff that mattered to me, like PEDs, nutrition, you name it. And that's kind of what, if I learned a lot more about that stuff while I was in university than I ever did business, which I was in business school for. So
Excellent. All right. So we're going to get into the coaching, the bodybuilding, and all of that here in a minute. Braeden, before we do, talk about where you grew up. You're there in Canada. So just paint a little bit of a picture in terms of your childhood. You kind of mentioned hockey seemed to be, a big part of your life, but, what was your relationship like, your parents, any siblings? Anything that maybe sticks out in your mind in terms of your upbringing up to about high school, and then we'll start working into more of the fitness talk. Okay.
for sure, man, absolutely. So I grew up in a city called Edmonton here in Alberta, Canada. Like I said, obviously I was a big hockey guy growing up, and hockey for us in Canada is very similar to like football and baseball for you guys in the US. It's kind of our go-to sport. So it was just, since I was 5 years old, I was on skates and I loved hockey. So being that we have long cold winters over here, it just kind of makes sense. So for me, it was just like at home was being in my skates, and I was very lucky. It's not a cheap sport. Skates and all the equipment and stuff are very expensive. I was very lucky and blessed to have parents who supported me all the way through. Paid for all my hockey, paid for all my equipment, took me to hockey when I was 7 years old. They're up at 6 a.m. driving me to the rink, all the way through until I had my own driver's license and so forth. And even at that point, they were still coming to my games and supporting me. When I moved away to play junior hockey, I played in a city like 7 hours from home. They would still drive up once in a while and catch my games there. They would come out to all the games where I was playing more locally, a couple hours away. So really supportive family. And same thing with my sister. Just I have a very good relationship with her. She's one of my best friends, and I love her to death. So yeah, for me, it's family is kind of everything. And based on my medical experiences, you really realize that too, how important that stuff is. So yeah, for me, man, honestly, with my upbringing and stuff, I'm just super blessed to have a family that was always there for me, supporting me. Again, like I couldn't really have even moved away for hockey if I didn't have a family like that, because I wasn't working. My job was to basically to play hockey. So my dad basically was paying for that, in a sense, like just giving me an allowance to live off of. Like, yes, my housing was paid for and my equipment was paid for, but my team and so forth, and like groceries by them. But outside of that, like anything you needed money for, gas, that kind of stuff, it was basically my dad was just helping me out with that. So it was I'm definitely blessed in that sense to have a family who supported me all the way through. And that kind of translated over to bodybuilding. And it's different because parents and people don't really understand bodybuilding, right? It's a really hard thing to understand. Like, it's the extreme of extremes. And I remember even when I had started using PEDs and stuff, it's a tough conversation to have with your parents, because there's obviously a big stigma behind it. And I'm a guy now who preaches safe use per se and nothing abusive. Now, at the same time, obviously, if you want to get to the upper echelons of this sport, there's going to need to be, like you said, some pushing things, and sometimes that isn't overly healthy. But when I look at kind of back at the whole situation, like I realized my parents were just looking out for me and really loved me and care for me. And there was a lot of questions. And I remember the first time that I actually did own up to using PEDs. My dad was kind of grilling me on them and whatnot, and urging like, hey, you're using, but I don't know for sure. Are you going to tell me? And it ended up just going to a conversation that was like, well, I was a 175 pound, 180 pound guy. I'm 240 pounds a couple years later with a lot more muscle mass. Do you think I use PEDs? So it was one of those like, yes, of course I'm using PEDs. And it's tough, right? Because they obviously don't want to encourage that you do that, which understandable, but a lot of times people don't understand that this stuff can be done properly. And yeah, so that was even when they kind of, we had that conversation, still very supportive, came out to my shows, always following my Instagram. To this day, my dad follows my Instagram, and he's following my followers and liking my athlete stuff. So it's pretty cool, man. I've always had a very supportive family, which I'm very, very, very thankful for.
So I want to, before we transition out of kind of your younger years, Braeden, I would like to have you just share with us some takeaways from your hockey experience. Obviously, that shaped your childhood. I'm sure there was a lot of lessons and a lot of values and just a lot of things that you gleaned and learned over those years. So I'm sure there's more than one or two, but what are a couple things that really stick out in your mind that you look back now as an adult and as a successful fitness coach or bodybuilding prep coach? What are a couple things you're like, man, I'm really thankful I had those years as a hockey player when I was younger because I learned this and this. What are a couple of those things?
Honestly, man, and I've said this to a million people, I'm a firm believer that the best bodybuilders, and obviously it's not obviously 100% accurate all the time, but some of the best athletes, especially the best ones that I've worked with, come from competitive sport backgrounds. And I don't think that's something you can really sweep under the rug in terms of, I think it's pretty blatantly obvious. And why would that be? And then from my own experience, it taught me hard work. It taught me discipline. There's a lot of things that you have to do, right? Like you might have a hockey game at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Well, your friends, when you're 16, 17 years old, might be going out to a party at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Well, you have a hockey game at 7 a.m. You're probably going to need to be prepared for that, right? So that kind of, a lot of that stuff transitioned into bodybuilding, even realizing like later in my hockey career when I was still only like 16, 17 years old and didn't have a super large understanding of nutrition and so forth, but it's like, hey, I should have some pasta and chicken before hockey game. I should have some rice and chicken or steak and rice. And it's like those things start to trickle in when you realize you're fueling yourself properly. And that obviously with bodybuilding becomes a major, major part of that. So the biggest thing for me, honestly, though, man, is just it taught me how to work hard, and you have to earn what you want. And like I said, I was never a super skilled guy when I played hockey. I mean, when I was playing kind of the upper ranks as a younger guy and midget AAA and stuff like that, I wasn't a bad hockey player by any means. I was a defenseman, and I had the ability to, I mean, obviously I got scouted and played junior, but at the same time, like I said, a lot of where I got with my hockey was just based on hard work and earning. And when you translate that over to life and bodybuilding and being an entrepreneur now and owning a couple businesses, as well as having competed in bodybuilding and coaching it now, you realize like, hey, a lot of this stuff literally is you, and you just have to work hard to get it done. So I would say from that aspect, being able to sacrifice for my goals and being able to just work for them, that's the biggest takeaways that I can say that hockey taught me. Because again, it's pretty cutthroat, especially as you grow up. There's a lot of politics and stuff within it. And the only way to get through that and see through that is kind of to keep your head down and work.
Love it, man. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, athletics, sports, it just adds so much value to young people's lives. And I know you mentioned Matt Jensen. I know I've heard him talk about, some of the athletes that he has that, grew up playing sports. They're just different than those ones that maybe just get into bodybuilding without that sports background. I've heard Matt on several different conversations, podcasts, talk about that. So love that. All right.
It's true, man.
So
It's true. Like I
let's,
said,
what's that?
I was just saying it's true, man. Like I said, I've been coaching for a long time now, and I see it every time I work with somebody. It's like I could almost guess without knowing somebody's competitive background. I could almost guess working with somebody for a couple months and be like, "Yeah, you played competitive sports growing up," and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be swimming or it could be hockey or football, right? They all have very similar um, prerequisites per se in terms of diligence and staying dedicated to your craft and the work ethic required and so forth. So yeah, I would say there's a huge crossover there. Absolutely.
Love it, man. Great. So let's transition then into you getting into to bodybuilding. You kind of already touched a little bit lightly on it, but why don't we really get deep into bodybuilding? So why don't you talk about like your first competition? And before you get there though, Braeden, I want to know, what do you feel like really attracted you to bodybuilding? Like what really sucked you in, pulled you in, and in your mind as a young person, you said like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. What was that? And then why don't you kind of transition into your first competition? We'll start unpacking the competitive history of Braeden Miller.
For sure. So I think the biggest thing that attracted me to it, man, was literally that it's up to me where I can take this, right? Like I grew up playing team sports, of course, and that I think was one of the areas I became frustrated with hockey when I was a captain on my university team. Like I was saying, yeah, we had some good guys who were super skilled, but like when those same guys are going out and getting drunk 3 days in a row and showing up for games hungover and your team's losing, at that point, it doesn't matter what I do because I have a team around me that doesn't really care and isn't showing up. Versus with bodybuilding, when I hit the stage or my feet touch on stage, at the end of the day, it comes down to every single hour or every single meal that I spent preparing for that time. And if I kind of sweep any of that under the rug and I fall short, I'm going to pay that. I'm responsible for that. Versus I could work my ass off all season and end up having a losing season, even though I worked my absolute hardest and it was not something I could control. So I think that plays into it a little bit. Yeah, I think that's the biggest part. And then in terms of like what really attracted me to it, honestly, I'm an introverted guy, to be quite fair. I mean, I've through my business and being an online coach over the last couple of years here, and really throwing myself out there in the social media world, I've had to learn to become a little bit more extroverted. I still refer to myself as like an extroverted introvert per se. But yeah, for me, it was just literally being in the gym and training hard. That is, I love it to this day. And like through even my medical issue that I went with, I was told I could never work out again. And you know what? You get told that, and this is your life. As far as I'm concerned, it was literally the only thing to come back for was watch me. And like you said, it becomes a part of your life. And it is part of my identity, honestly. Like I hate saying that because we're human and we're a lot more than one dimensional, but I don't have to be one dimensional to say it's a part of my life and it's kind of who I am, and I've been asked before, right? Even some of my best friends who I grew up with through hockey. And that's another cool thing about hockey that I wanted to mention is like some of my best friends to this day were created through that sport when I was 5 years old. I have literally a couple of my best friends I met at 5, 6 years old playing hockey. But guys like these, again, who see you go through some medical things that I went through and sometimes they have questions for you like, why are you still doing this, man? Like, we don't want to lose you. We almost lost you once. Like, this is crazy. And it's hard. I don't ever have answers to them. And honestly, I've said a million times, like, I can't explain it because you're not going to get it. Like, there's things you're passionate about, I'm sure, that you couldn't explain to me why you love them. This is one of the things for me that I can't really put into words. This is what I love, and this is what I'm going to do. And like you said, I mean, I obviously don't want to die and I approach things in a way that I don't set that up. But at the end of the day, if something ever happened to me just because I was working out, and it essentially already did, I could live with that, knowing that that's basically, I was pursuing my passion, versus I couldn't live with going day to day, walking on eggshells, trying to hold myself back from doing what I really love. That's a bigger burden, I think, than the burden per se of walking around knowing there is risks with what you're doing.
So transition into your first competition and just unpack a little bit of that competition history, maybe touching on some of those highlights. You already talked about winning shows and things like that, but maybe some of the highlights for you personally.
Yeah, man. So my first competition, I guess, would have been, yeah, I think it was end of 2015. It may have even been early 2016. I competed in the light heavyweight class. I was kind of at the bottom of the weigh-in. I believe I weighed 170, 178, I think. 178 or 179. And it was great, man. It was just a regional show here in Alberta. So it was Northerns, it's called. So it was the Northern Alberta Championships. And like I said, man, I was a pretty introverted dude going into that. So it was a really, really strange thing to me to be like, you're two weeks out from getting on stage and basically a thong and being in front of 100, 200 people and posing. It was a super weird thing. But again, I had just become so passionate about the training that I realized, like, I don't care who's there. Like, this is for me. And the first time your feet hit the stage, man, what a riot that was. I'll tell you that much. It was something else, a rush like I had never gotten before. So yeah, I ended up winning that show, which was great. I had just actually hired my buddy who I had mentioned. I went out to his show. I had actually hired his coach. Looking back on that whole thing now, and it's obviously really easy to say this, and I'm sure a lot of people have these same experiences, especially knowing what I know now, it was a horrible idea to hire him. He really, like, yes, he helped me, and I'm always grateful for that. But there were some things that I look at back and I'm like, oof, I don't know if I agree with that play, or I would have done things a lot differently, especially for a first time competitor, right? But you know what? I won, and he helped get me into the sport, so I am forever grateful for that. He taught me a lot about what I would like to see from a coach, and what I would like to be as a coach, and what I would like to not be as a coach as well. And like, there are certain things. So that was my first competition. I ended up going to Provincials. So we used to have a 3-tier system here. It's only a 2-tier system now in the CPA, like you guys have in the NPC, where you have basically qualifiers and then you go to national level shows. We used to have a 3-tier system. So it was basically a regional show, a provincial show, and then nationals. So at the time it was actually the Canadian Bodybuilding Federation, CBBF, not the CPA. And we essentially, so I went the 2 weeks after my first show, I went to Provincials, which was kind of the next tier that qualified you for nationals. And I ended up winning there as well, which was really cool. I lost in the overall to become Mr. Alberta, but that was whatever. I was just super happy to have placed again and won again and be a little bit more improved. And again, like, I wasn't a big dude, but I think I had pretty good flow to my physique, and I was definitely conditioned. So again, at that point, I was just addicted, man. I was already hooked. Like, there was no way you were getting me away from that sport. So yeah, I ended up taking a year off after that, and trying to put on some muscle to compete at the national level. And I knew, like, our system's a little bit different here in Canada than you guys have in the US. So in Canada, to win a pro card, you have to win the overall, and we only have 2 national shows per year. So it's very tough to get a pro card per se. Like, I know personally some really good friends who were in that top 3 at national shows for 5-6 years before winning a pro card, and then they're already finishing in top 5 at the pro level, right? So my goal for my first nationals, which would have been 2017, was to place top 10 in light heavies, and I had maxed out the class basically at that point. And this is where a lot of lessons came to me. So my coach at the time was actually competing in the same show, and towards the end of that contest prep, it was very easy to see that coach was competing in the same show. Yes, we were different weight classes. He was a super heavyweight, I was a light heavyweight. But the level of attention it went out the window. He really didn't care about me. And you know what? I get it from the side of competitive bodybuilding is a selfish sport. You want to be the best bodybuilder you can for the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever that looks like. You essentially have to shut yourself off to the world, right? Now, if your job is literally to take care of people who are doing the same thing that you're supposed to do, it gets tough. So, like I said, for me, it was literally, I think I was 14 days out, and I was sitting at 216 pounds, roughly 215, 216 pounds. So for me, that's my weight cap's 198 to get into light heavies, right? And I was not big enough to be a heavyweight. So I kept saying to him, like, you sure this is gonna work, man? Like, he was giving me a burger and fries every couple of days. And I was just like, dude, like, I got 16 pounds to lose, man. And at this point, I had been helping people with diets and stuff for quite a while. Like, I understood nutrition very good. And he was like, you just got to trust the process, man. You guys just got to trust the process. And I'm like, well, man, nothing's happening. And I have 2 weeks to be 16 pounds less than I am now. So for me, I just said, you know what? I realize this isn't optimal, but this is not going where I needed to go. So I just took control of my own diet. I basically had to murder myself for 2 weeks to get where I needed to be. And it was funny because I just decided, like, I didn't want to deal with any drama or anything. So I just said to him at the time, like, yeah, I'm following. And then all of a sudden I start shedding weight, dropping weight. He's like, see, look, I told you, just trust the process. And like, on the back end, and I don't ever encourage somebody does this, but at the end of the day, you got to look out for you too, right? At the end of the day, it was just like changes. And I ended up weighing in after fasting for 16 hours. So I couldn't eat to weigh in. I weighed in at 198.0. And I'm talking for the last 2 weeks of that prep, I doubled my cardio. I absolutely tanked my food from where he had it. Like, I had to suffer to weigh in, and I weighed in at 198.0, not 0.1 of a pound over or under my cap. Which again was tough because then I basically had, it was roughly 4 p.m. or so, and I basically had that night to load. So I was learning a lot of this shit as I went at that point, because I had never loaded people for a show or anything like that. I had done it a couple times myself, but it was pretty cool because I learned a lot. And that's stuff you can take over to your athletes in the future. And the biggest lesson for me there, and after that show, I had promised myself I would never coach a competitive bodybuilder while I was bodybuilding, because I realized how much I cared about the sport. And it was actually that national showing that really convinced me, like, hey, you're going to be a pro bodybuilder. You want to be a pro bodybuilder. This is what you're going to pursue. So as soon as I got off that stage, I actually let my coach go. I hired a new coach. I had gotten my absolute biggest that off season. My off season prior, when I was competing in light heavies, I had gotten up to about 230 pounds, and it was a pretty soft 230 pounds, to be honest. Like, I had a lot of body fat on me. The following year in my off season, and I took a year, and this was a year and a half later when I maxed out my weight, because I took another year and a half off to really improve. Before I was about to start our prep for the Arnold Classic, I got up to 250 pounds, but I still had a six pack. So it was drastically different physique from one off season to the next. And again, I think that came from level of care from a coach, and working with a coach that had very similar principles and ideologies to me. So I understood them very well and believed in them. And there was also just a shift in mindset for me. I had told myself, like, you're going to be a pro. You want to be a pro. This is what you need to do. So my life turned into 100% bodybuilding. And there was zero balance. And I think that's an area I probably could have improved on. I don't like using the term balance because I think it's kind of an excuse for people to fail. But I do think there's an ability to have a life outside of bodybuilding and be a good bodybuilder. I don't think you need to push everybody away and so forth, which is kind of what I did. And again, I'm very lucky. I still have a lot of people in my life that I do after my accident, because they definitely didn't have to be in my life still after kind of everything I had done. So yeah, I mean, bodybuilding's brought me a lot, and it's given me my career, honestly, man. And I'm super, super thankful for it. So
So let's you've alluded to several times, and you mentioned it to me actually before we hit record, that you had a medical issue that basically has taken you off the competitive bodybuilding stage at least for now. So if you don't mind, Braeden, just maybe diving into that a little bit
For
and
sure.
touching on that, and then I really want to transition into coach talk. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that same off season that I was just talking about, like I said, I was kind of the biggest I'd ever been. I was just under 250 pounds. I believe I was hovering around like 245, 247 ish. I was at the gym with my coach at the time, actually, who was a good friend of mine, and we were training. He was just spotting me. I was training, and we trained at kind of a old school hardcore bodybuilding gym where there was nobody in the gym. The only person in the gym at that time was the owner of the gym's mom, who was 75 years old, just working the front desk, sitting there. So we were squatting that day, training legs, and super hot day, like 30 Celsius, and it's a little warehouse style gym, so it's just an oven in there. So I had done a couple warm up sets on squats, and after my last warm up, I got super lightheaded. And at the time, I was using some insulin and growth hormone and stuff, so we thought maybe it was a blood sugar issue. So sat down, had a couple sips of my carb powder, had a couple sips of a Gatorade, and I was fine. So we kind of just waited a few more minutes, made sure that everything was all good, which again, I had felt 100% fine a couple seconds later. So we just let myself calm down, chill out, and I went to do one more warm up set. And I did a couple reps with 405 on my back and then racked the bar. And I went to walk away from the squat rack and I just collapsed, like just dropped. I obviously, like at this point, I don't remember any of this. But basically, kind of through being told what happened, I just kind of collapsed like forwards. So I like slumped down on my knees. And after a few minutes, like nothing happened. Like I was just laying there and turning blue, essentially. So I had went upwards of just a little bit longer than 15 minutes actually without oxygen. And my coach at the time, he himself had some major medical issues that had actually stopped him from competing in the past. And he kind of like almost was in shock when I just collapsed, like he wasn't expecting it. So he literally went into shock and didn't do anything. He just kind of stood there. And then same thing with the owner of the gym's mom, who was 75. She didn't know how to give CPR or anything. So they basically just kind of let me sit there, and they did call 911, and basically the paramedics had to teach or had to talk the old lady who was working the gym through how to give me chest compressions and CPR. And then Spencer kind of snapped out of it and took over and helped with chest compressions and stuff until they showed up. I was intubated on the gym floor. They had to hit me with paddles to bring me back. There's a lot of things with the whole story, and I won't go too crazy with it, but somebody wanted me here today, man. I probably shouldn't be here today, and somebody wanted me here today. So usually paramedics will hit a body that has flatlined per se 3 times with the defibrillator and the paddles before they kind of pronounce them dead. At some point, it becomes basically abuse to a carcass. And that day, for some reason, and they actually came to visit me after the fact because of this, that day, for some reason, they decided to go a 4th time. And on the 4th time they used the paddles on me was when they actually brought me back, and at that point rushed me to the hospital and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of against, they're not actually allowed to reach out to people they help and go visit them in the hospital and stuff, just from the rules of whatever it is. But they actually did kind of go up to their bosses and per se and tell them that they wanted to meet me. And so when I was in the hospital, that was pretty cool. They came by and I basically got to meet the guys that saved my life. So yeah, at that point, I basically was, I went to the hospital and I was put into an induced coma, where I was in a coma for just under 4 days, essentially 3-4 days there. And a couple of days later, I started to come out of it, and they had me on something called brain cooling. So basically, you know, in movies where they have like cryo chambers where they freeze somebody and then they can unthaw. It's essentially very similar to that. What they did to me, they basically lowered my body temperature so far to decrease my brain swelling, because there was about, they had taken my now wife and my family and stuff into a room and let them know there was about a 90% chance I wouldn't come out of my coma. And of that 90% chance, there was a very, very large chance that I would be brain dead or brain damaged from the amount of time I went without oxygen. But yeah, I guess for me, somebody was looking out for me. And I ended up waking up a few days later from my coma, and I was intubated. So like I had this big tube down my throat, and like at the time I didn't know what was going on. I just remember looking around, and like first thing I said was fuck. It's just like I had no idea what happened, no recollection of anything, but I knew, I was aware enough to know you're covered in tubes, filled with tubes, laying in a hospital bed, something's wrong. So yeah, that was kind of it for me. It was obviously super shitty. I ended up having to have a subcutaneous defibrillator put in. So what had actually happened, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Boston Lloyd and what kind of happened to him. But I actually was talking with some bodybuilder buddies about this the other day, because so I had a spontaneous aortic dissection. When I was back squatting, my aorta actually split into kind of a V. When that happened, obviously there was a cascade of events. There was a blood clot that got formed within that V and so forth. So there was just a lot of things that went sour at the same time. And I'll just say this, a lot of people, and early, especially when this happened, I mean, you're a bodybuilder, you use steroids, you're a big dude. People automatically assume that you are abusing drugs and X, Y, and Z. And like, it's funny because, I mean, we've had a lot of deaths in the sport over the past couple of years, which is super, super sad. And things come back to that. But it's like, and that's one of the things that rubs me wrong, right? Like even when Dallas passed away, or George, or any of these guys, it's like people just start talking and making things up and not actually understanding what went on. And I realized this because I went through this firsthand. To this day, I still have people who walk around basically saying I was abusive for drugs. And it goes as far as to, I've literally seen messages from people telling other people what I was running when nobody at that time knew what I was doing. Even like when this had happened, I was on a cruise dose for basically over 3 months. And I was somebody who looked after my blood pressure. I got my blood work done. There's other things I wish I would have done more of, had cardiac MRIs, had this kind of stuff, because I would have known. So for me, where this came from, I was actually genetically predisposed to this. I had a weakened aortic wall that was kind of hereditary, passed through my family. I had grandfathers who had issues and some cardiac issues based on this stuff. I played with fire and I got burned because essentially, and I had to kind of figure this out. And I did ask my cardiologist because I wanted to know. I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't going to change something if they had told me you did this to yourself by using steroids, or they told me you didn't. So I wanted to know. And for my parents' sake, I wanted to know, obviously, because from the parent side of things, they just look and it's like, well, what are they going to think happened? Steroids did this, right? Especially with the negative connotations around it. So yeah, I asked my cardiologist and stuff what had happened, and basically they said, well, we're not ignorant to the fact it contributed some way, but at the same time, you played high level hockey, you were an athlete, all this kind of stuff. If you got hit hard enough playing hockey, junior hockey, this could have happened. And it did happen actually to a professional hockey player just 2 years ago. And he wasn't even from a hit. He was just sitting on the bench and it happened. So when this kind of stuff is prevalent, it can really happen. And for me, like I said, yes, I was playing with fire. I was 250 pounds almost, deadlifting 500-600 pounds, back squatting 500-600 pounds, eating 6,000 calories a day, taking PEDs. But for people to sit back and say I was abusive and stuff, they don't know what I was doing. I had only taken PEDs for 2 years. I know people who have taken 10 times the amount I did and done that for 10 years plus and not had issues, right? So That's a big one for me. And it's, I really don't care anymore. People can say what they want about me. I know what I've ran, and I could tell anybody what the largest cycle I've ever ran was. And I don't really care. I'm not going to hide that. I really don't care. So it honestly makes me laugh now. At the time when it was happening and you're fresh out of the hospital and you start hearing things, like, it's bothersome at that point for sure. But more so, I think it was, I was a little fragile at that point. Cause like I said, I was told I'm never supposed to really train again. I was told basically at that point, like, your life falls apart, because it's like, this is what I love. This is literally what I care about. And at that moment in time, honestly, it was pretty much all I cared about. And I'm pretty lucky because I am with my wife now, who at the time was my girlfriend. But we've had conversations, and she said to me, like, if I continued on that road that I was on, we wouldn't be together anymore. I cared more about bodybuilding than I cared about a relationship. I'd come home, she'd want to talk, hang out, sleep together. And I'm like, yeah, you go to bed. I got another couple of meals to eat. I got to hit the kitchen. I'm going to watch some bodybuilding videos. And that was my life. And you know what? It is what it is. But yeah, so it's definitely, and I've said it a million times, as crazy as it was to go through, if I had to go through it again, I absolutely would, to get to where I am today. It's taught me a lot. The hardest thing was just seeing how hard it is on the people around you. And obviously, like, I do train now, and it's taken a long time for me to get back to a place where I'm very happy with my physique and so forth. But like you said, man, I mean, when they told me that I could never train again, the response basically in my head was, fuck you, watch me, because this is what I know. You're going to tell somebody that they can't do the only thing they know how to do. And like I said, I mean, hockey was well past my time at that time. So literally bodybuilding was what I knew. So yeah, and that's kind of where that evolved for me. And yeah, I haven't stepped on stage since then. And I don't know if I will. I may again. We'll see. I obviously have limitations and stuff, having a defibrillator, and have to be extra cautious in my health. But my day-to-day life is lived like a bodybuilder, man. I sit on my computer doing my coaching stuff and check-ins for 10, 12 hours a day. And outside of that, it's meal prep. It's eat my meals, train hard, and have fun doing the damn thing. So yeah, man, that's a little bit about my journey and my story. It's been a bit of a wild one, but here we are.
Yeah. Here we are, man. Always something going on. There's always lessons to be learned. Now, Braeden, I kind of want to transition into coach talk a little bit. And where I want to start with this is something that you mentioned earlier, and I really want you to expound on it. You said, I think it was the first coach that you had, did some things that, looking back, knowing what you know now, you wouldn't have done that way, and you don't think maybe they were the best. And then you had the coach that was prepping you. He was competing in the same competition as you, and you had to kind of take things into your own hands 2 weeks out, which was not ideal, to say the least.
Mhm.
So the starting point with the coaching talk, I would like you to expound on what you just said, in terms of those things that you've kind of learned from having coaches, to what you didn't want to be, and what you didn't want to do as a coach yourself, and how has that kind of catapulted you and matured you as your own coach, as you have your own prep coach business and things of that nature.
For sure, yeah. So like, I've learned a lot since I have really thrown myself in to be a coach, because like I said, I'm kind of a nerd of this stuff, and I love reading peer-reviewed articles and studies and like research on drugs and food and training, you name it. And like, that's really what drives me and keeps me ticking. And the more that I did that, the more I realized, like, what the hell was my first coach doing? Even like my first cycle, right? It was basically, it looked like something he could have pulled off of a forum, like typical 500 milligrams of testosterone, this and that. And like, what I know now is I probably could have made equal progress on half the dosage of stuff, because I was completely natural at the time, and I had an ability to train hard and do a lot of this stuff. And I'm not saying it's completely wrong to start that way. I just don't do it anymore. And I guarantee you I could have had less implications on my health and stuff with doing things a little smarter, and still made the exact same amount of progress. But in terms of the other stuff, realistically, like I said, I just realized what I needed to be as a coach and what I didn't ever want to be. And I didn't ever want to be the guy who cared more about his own bodybuilding than my athletes. So that's why I said I would never coach a competitive athlete until I was at the point that I was no longer competing. And for me, it unfortunately came sooner, but also very fortunately, because I'm so passionate about bodybuilding that it was like after my accident, okay, I realized I was going to try to get myself back in the gym, but I understood getting myself to a stage was pretty far fetched without the PEDs and stuff. And having been as big as I was, it's tough to almost be a has-been and be like, I've been there, but I'm going to be this natty dude and get on stage there. So I wasn't willing to do that. So it's just like, I'm just going to train my ass off, but you know what? I'm going to turn people into freaks, and I'm going to use my knowledge and my passion to help people get on stage. So yeah, that's kind of what catapulted me into that. So that was the setup behind what I didn't want to be. I wanted to be somebody who was super educated and had a basis behind what they were doing versus somebody who, and I felt this way about my early coaching. They did a lot of like a mirror approach. So they were working with a top level bodybuilding coach, and they just projected those same principles on everybody that they worked with. And yeah, for a lot of people, they work. And like for me, it worked. I'm not ignorant to the fact that like genetically, I do have pretty good genetics per se. I'm not a genetic freak or anything, but like I respond. And realistically, you probably could have taken any approach with me at that point, being so new to the sport, and I probably would have looked pretty damn good. Right. So, but at some point, it's like, okay, are you good, or are you doing things that are optimal? And I look at my knowledge behind training, nutrition, PEDs, all of that stuff combined now. And I look back in those situations and I'm like, there was none of this. There was no rhyme to reason here. 90% of the time, my athletes can ask me a why behind something, and I'm going to have an explanation for it versus just less food, more cardio, more drugs, right? Like that's almost the approach that it was. So for me, that was the major thing that I wanted to touch on. Was that was kind of the turning point for me, was literally like, you've been in this situation, this wasn't ideal, you never can be that guy, so figure out a way to not be that guy. And for me, it literally was just providing a level of care. And that I think stems from my passion for bodybuilding, because I love the sport so much, and I'm a really competitive person. I always have been. When somebody works with me, I want them to fucking win per se, and pardon my French there, but I want them to win. So if you're working with me, I'm going to push you to tap into new levels of you that you've never been able to achieve, because that's what it's going to take to win. And I've let go of athletes before because they just don't have it. You know what I mean? Like on a weekly basis, I don't want to have to convince you to do this. I want you to show up, and I want to look at your check-ins and be excited because you're as passionate about this as I am. So yeah, that's kind of just it for me. I mean, continuing as a bodybuilding coach has allowed me to pursue that passion, and I got kind of lucky per se. I don't know if it's luck or if there was more to it, but in my first season of really pursuing competitive bodybuilding coaching, which would have been 2019, just before the pandemic, and I was putting people on stage before that, but I was a lot more lifestyle based, and I was working in like a big box gym doing in-person training before I left and fully decided to go full throttle into my business as a coach. Because like I said, I mean, my accident happened in 2018, and end of 2018 in July, and then 2019 was when I kind of stepped into really putting people on stage. I actually won my my first pro card that year, and for me that was like unbelievable. Like I actually have the pro card sitting beside me here right now in my office, just as a reminder, because the feeling of that, I don't even know if I could, like winning my own pro card and with my previous schools were, I don't know if that could top it, man. Even like it's I've won a couple pro cards with athletes this year, and it's the feeling every time. You can't mimic that, man. So just seeing how excited they are, and the hug you get when you get backstage, and them getting off stage and crying in your arms because they've achieved a lifelong goal, super super dope. So for me, that's kind of what makes me tick and makes me really want to do this more. And like, yeah, I'm super obsessed now, and I want to win more pro cards because at the end of the day, that feeling for me and seeing those athletes so satisfied and happy, it can't be matched, dude.
Now, I want to ask you, Braeden, you said that you were kind of training, in a big box gym, and that's kind of how you got your, training, coaching start, so to speak. And then you decided at some point, I'm going all in, and I'm just going to do this, kind of on my own and online and things like that. Would you talk about that transition just for a quick minute? Because fear is something that holds all of us back, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
we have to, as human beings, figure out how to master that fear. And I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of hang up, so to speak, when it comes to money and things like that for a lot of us, including myself.
yeah,
I'm putting myself
yeah,
in that category. So anytime that we break away from the comfortable, working for, the man, or working for a gym where you're like, I've got some sort of stable income. They're doing the advertising for me. They're bringing the clients, whatever it might look like within fitness training, coaching, right? But there's some sort of comfort. There's some sort of
yeah,
stability
yeah,
within reason. But then going from that to stepping into the uncomfortable of I'm going all in. I'm going in on myself. I'm going to get out of this gym. I'm going to go all online. I'm going to do whatever it might look like for you as a coach, or building a business within the fitness industry. Talk about that. Was there some fear? Was there some anxiety? Were there
yeah.
some things that you kind of had to overcome and break through to kind of step out and go for that? Talk us through that for a little bit, because I think that'll be
For
very
sure.
encouraging, impactful for some of the people listening and watching this today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, I mean, probably just like you, and I'm sure starting your podcast was a hurdle to overcome, and there was fears with that, right? So, for me, there was huge ones, man, and like even to this day, I deal with a little bit with imposter syndrome, right? Because I see the success here and there, and it's like, do I deserve this? Am I good enough? And we always have that little voice in the back of our head. But for me, it's I always am able to remind myself, like, yeah, you've earned this, you've gotten yourself here, and you're gonna get better. So honestly, in terms of the hurdles and the stressors and so forth, um, there's basically I, a bigger hurdle there. So when I actually left my gig as a personal trainer working at a big box gym where I was promised those biweekly paychecks, I was in the middle of building my first house. So I was taking on a mortgage at that time. And it had gotten to a point where, like I said, I mean, I can't really put into words the passion that I truly have for training and bodybuilding, but even just the training side, which obviously being in a big box gym, I was working with a lot of non-competitors. Um, so I was going into work every day, and I was one of the busiest trainers at the training facility, which was the biggest gym we had in Edmonton. And it was very sales driven. Like it was just like they didn't actually care about the quality of product. They just were jamming people down your throat. Here's a person, sell them on this, sell them that package. And like as a trainer, I'm making $22 an hour while my clients are paying $90 an hour based on the level of trainer I was. I look around me, people are like the trainers I'm working with just have a weekend course that they've taken to be a trainer. I see them doing dangerous shit with people all the time. And like I'm coming home at the end of a day and bitching to my now wife that like I can't believe this happened today. You should see what was happening here. And like I'm miserable the entire time I'm at work because I'm looking around and I'm just like, this ain't me. I don't belong here. Like, what am I doing? And like, yeah, sure. Essentially, you're helping people. And I did make some friendships and change some people's lives. I remember one dude specifically had basically came in to sign up for training because his doctor told him he had to. And he was very unhealthy, pre-diabetic. And because I had the nutrition experience I did, I had written him a diet on the side and I helped him. And like to this day, he dropped a ton of weight and he's messages me 2 or 3 times a year just to talk and saying thank you. And we're talking that was 5 6 years ago that I was able to help this gentleman. So pretty cool to see the impact there. But yeah, man, at the end of the day, it came down to I was extremely frustrated with the surroundings I was in. I didn't believe in any of it. And I mean, at the end of the day, and I still have a problem with this via social media and the online coaching world, this isn't a sales job. Like, yes, you're going to have to sell yourself, but I'm a firm believer if you have a good product, it's going to sell itself, right? Like I don't go around begging for athletes anymore because quite frankly, I don't feel the need to, because if I'm producing results as a coach, athletes are going to come to me. And the more that I've seen success as a coach and the more that I've won as a coach, that's happened. And then you get positive experiences and referrals because your athletes enjoy working with you and they're happy with the way things work. So yeah, it's basically that's kind of it for me. It's in a whole nutshell, that was my experience. Don't get me wrong, I think there's a ton of value, and I think a lot of people that want to get into the world of online coaching and being a successful coach, I think they need to spend some time in a gym, in a setting, actually learning people's bodies and seeing how people's bodies move in person. There's a lot of value for it. And like for me, I did a lot of certifications and stuff while I was doing that personal training, and I did a lot of different courses, which was super cool. And that was one of the things that job had given me, was they had basically an allowance and they would comp some of your courses. So I look back at it, it wasn't a waste of time because a lot of these courses that I took were valuable, and I got discounts per se and only had to comp 40-60% of the cost myself, while the rest was covered by Good Life. So at that time, like I said, the right play was to move, and it was scary as hell. And honestly, like, people are people. You're promised that, and I had told half of, basically majority of my clients, like, hey, I'm leaving, I would love to continue to work with you. It's going to be online based though. I'll provide you training, nutrition, etc. And everyone, of course, is yeah, we're going to come with you, we're going to come with you. And then you actually make the transition, and it's like one or two people that come with you. So luckily for me, when I actually had pulled the, like, bitten the bullet and dove into it, I did already have 10 or 11 people who I was coaching online. So I did have a little bit of income, but then it was like, yeah, a whole new beast when you actually walk away and you think you're going to have this roster of 40-50 people, and all of a sudden it's like, no, you got 10. And like, I've rebuilt my roster a few times, and I've talked with some other people about this, but I got my roster quite big in a year roughly, and then COVID happens, and like, that's my first experience of a lot of changes in the world as an online coach, and seeing how it can affect the economy and stuff. People are losing their job left, right, and center. Well, as an online coach, you're very, very far, or a bodybuilding coach, you're very far from a staple product that somebody needs in their life. And when their livelihood is cut off, well, where do they trim the fat? Right. And like, I'm not joking you, man. And I seen it with, like, even Matt and I had a really good conversation about this. Like, he lost a very large chunk of his clients during COVID too, because these guys who are pros at that point just expect you to coach them for free. And I, even when I was coaching amateurs, I had that kind of stuff happen too. Like, I become very close to my clients, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, I got a family to feed too, and I got goals I need. So like, if you're not paying me, but you're expecting me to still do the work, how does that work? Because now I'm working 10-hour, 12-hour days for all my athletes, but I'm not making any money. And yeah, it was tough. I lost more than 3/4 of my roster when COVID happened, especially, like, I hate to put people in a box, but like, a lot of young bodybuilders are broke because bodybuilding is an expensive sport. And if you're in university and stuff and pursuing it, like I was that guy, I was a broke university student that put every single dollar I had towards food and PEDs and coaching. And outside of that, there is no room to afford anything else. So when the world takes a hit, that's kind of, I was the guy who lost his clients, and like, that was stressful as hell. But you know what? Like I said, I'm the type of guy that will always better myself, simply because of, and it goes back to hockey for me, because I believe I have the work ethic to push through and find a way to get things done. And you know what? We did just that. We kind of stuck it out. I really made sure that the people that did stick with me, I kept offering them the highest level of service. We made, even if it was stupid training programs just based on bands that they could build in their house. Like, is it optimal? Far from, but at least we're helping them continue to move forward, right? And then post COVID, it was really good, man. And now where we're at here, I'm thankful for those experiences. But like you said, there's been a ton of times where in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't know if we can do this. And right, and like, even when that COVID stuff happens, you start to doubt yourself, and you're like, if one little world shift has rocked my business so hard, is this sustainable? But then I go back to, like, I went to university for something totally different. I spent 6 years or 6 months in the corporate world before I came back to coaching. And for me, I was just like, I really don't care if it's going to be tough. I would rather do what I love and have some troubles within that than show up in an office, sit in front of a computer that I'm miserable at, that I really don't care about, and do that for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, over and over. Like at some point, I'm going to want to off myself, because it's like there's no passion there at all. And it's just the same shit day in and day out. Versus now, like, yeah, I work 2-3 times more than I used to when I was in the corporate world, but it ain't work. I'm doing what I love. And like, yeah, sure, it gets exhausting sometimes, but I don't know. When you love something, man, I'm sure you know, it's not work at all. And it's cliche to say, but that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah.
All right. Love that explanation there, Braeden. We're going to start heading towards the finish line. I want to touch on a couple more things before we wrap up this awesome conversation. Now you've mentioned Matt Jensen a couple times. I saw Cam Cheek tagged in one of your Instagram photos. Yeah. So the question that I kind of want to ask you, and some of the info I want to gather from you, Braeden, is you know, you're talking about always learning and just loving, you know, the knowledge side of this game. Who are some of the coaches? Who are some of the influences in terms of more coaching that you've really gleaned from, and that you really maybe have modeled your coaching after?
Yeah. So honestly, like the biggest one I would say 100% is Matt Jensen, man. I've been following Matt since he was natural himself, and he had started working with guys behind the scenes, like early on, worked with Justin Compton and then Dallas McCarver and stuff. And like, I used to follow those guys' logs on MD and stuff, like it was biblical. And like I said, eventually it was pretty cool the way things worked out with Matt and I. So I'll just kind of blitz through the conversation so it's not long and drawn out. But I basically hired Matt a couple summers ago now. This is after my accident. I had a very busy roster, and I didn't want to think about my own diet anymore. I didn't want to think about my own training, and I saw it as an opportunity to learn. And like I said, I mean, I had a couple of conversations with Matt. We had went back and forth in the past. So I ended up hiring him, and he decided to take me on, which was pretty cool. And we had some fun working together, and I learned a lot. But during that experience, actually, Matt called me one day and offered me an opportunity. He actually asked me if I wanted to be a Camp Janssen coach, which was really cool. And there was a lot of opportunity there, and we discussed some really cool opportunities. So for me, like, I'm fanboying hard at this point, because this is somebody that I've idolized for years and I really want to model. And again, I mean, like, obviously there's things that happen with Matt where people in the industry try to drag him down, but I see him continually come up and stay on top, right? So it kind of reflects very largely with a lot of the stuff that I've seen. So yeah, I honestly, I had to really think about that opportunity because it was so cool. But I had been at a position where I had built my business up, and it was really, really hard for me to kind of step away from that, which is essentially what I had to do. I was going to become a private contractor working for his business. And like I said, I saw more for myself, in the sense that I didn't really see a reason why I couldn't run a similar business in Canada to what kind of he had built in the US. And I felt there was a gap within Canada in the coaching. So after kind of we discussed the opportunity a little bit more, I kind of had said to him, you know what, man, I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm just not sure if it's going to work. And then he said, you know what, I agree. I was going to have to change all of my pricing to US dollars. There was just a lot of things that were going to be a lot tougher. So at that point, we had that conversation, and Matt said to me, you know what, man, I see a ton of value in you as a coach, and I believe in what you're doing. I want to help you in any way I can. Let me introduce you to some people and see if this can help. So he actually introduced me to the guys that run the back end of his business, Stephen and Tony, and they deal with kind of all the admin side of coaching and helping grow the brand and so forth. So I had to sit down with them and met with them and Matt, and it was really clear that at that point in time, that's what I needed. They had turned Matt's business around huge for him after some COVID struggles and whatnot. And where I was at with my business, I know that I had the opportunity to be a lot busier than I was. I just needed some things offloaded from me that I could really focus my efforts on coaching. So after sitting down with Matt and these gentlemen, I decided, you know what, this is what I need. So hiring them was the best thing I ever did. It propelled my business forward a huge time because I just got to focus on coaching. They dealt with all the back end admin work, my website, you name it. We changed my processes. And that kind of steamrolled into me being able to hire coaches under me. And now I have 6 coaches who are part of my team that work under me, and I kind of oversee and mentor them. So it's just been an absolute world-class experience. And Matt has to have been one of the guys that has had the biggest impact on that, not even just from like a knowledge standpoint. Like I've learned a ton from him just observing over the years. I'm a very, very good observer. I watch people and I pay attention to things. And I think that's also what makes me a good coach. And that's kind of what I did with Matt. And even when I was working with him, like reverse engineering a lot of the stuff he was doing with me and whatnot taught me a lot. And that's kind of where a lot of my relationships and people I look up to, and I have a really cool circle of friends in the industry now, between like guys like Cam Cheek, Mark Tominick, Justin Mahaley, all these kind of guys are people that are winning and succeeding in this sport. And it's really cool that we have a circle of people that are just pushing each other. And like even Austin Stout is my mentor. Yesterday, he won the overall at North Americans with Felix and won a pro card. And it's like, I love seeing these dudes succeed because these are guys that I like to think are in my circle outside of obviously my coaching team, who I'm very, very proud to be helping bring up and see them succeed. There's inspiration that I get from these other guys. And I would say those guys are going to be the likes of your Matt, Cam, Mark, Justin, Austin. These are dudes that every day I'm learning stuff from, whether it's just through conversation, sending athlete pictures to each other and hey, what are you going to do here? What are you going to do there? It's really cool. So I'm very thankful for those opportunities and kind of what social media has granted me and access to these individuals. And that was one of the reasons that I decided to just pass the reins to Cam as well. I stopped working with Matt for a little bit. And then I just got to the point I was too busy and focusing on my business. And then I got to the point I was like, you can do both again. Like you can prioritize yourself as a bodybuilder while also continuing to stay on top of your business. And so I was like, you know what, I believe in everything Cam's doing. I know I had followed him for quite a while and we had some conversations, and I knew that our way of doing things was very similar in terms of training, nutrition, those philosophies. So I just said, you know what, I'm gonna hire him. So I basically passed the ropes to him, and a lot of these guys also work with the same dudes on the back end. So that's kind of where a lot of this kind of came full circle. And it's really cool, man. So like I said, it's been absolutely great working with Cam. I really decided this year, because in past years when you're traveling as a prep coach and bodybuilding coach and going to all these contests, it's pretty tough to stay on your own game, but it's possible. And previously I had let myself go. Like I would barely eat on show days when I was on the road. And then I'd ended up having big cheat meals with my athletes after the fact, because I was so anxious and stressed on show day that I'm not worried about me eating. I'm really focused on them. But I realized, like, hey, if you're prepared and you're practicing what you preach all the time, because I was 90% of the time on, but then I'd go to these shows and that 10% of the time it would just be a wasted 4 or 5 days because my nutrition was off. I was eating 2 meals a day. And it's like, hey, if you're prepared, you can absolutely do this. And Cam and I had a conversation, and that was one of my goals was this year to be dialed in on my own stuff, to lead by example for my athletes, because I also have athletes who are coaches and I coach some coaches. And it's like, hey, if you want to coach, you still got to be able to hold yourself accountable as an athlete. So I've done that this year, and it was really cool. And I've made some of the best progress I've ever made. And I would argue that I might be the best I've ever been, honestly, right now. And that's just simply because I personally, and I can say this in a non-arrogant way, I execute and I need to, right? And I do what I expect my athletes to do. And that's also what I believe makes me a better coach. I'm in the trenches doing what I'm telling my athletes to do. And I'm not just sitting there on the sidelines barking orders. It's like, no, I'm telling you to train hard. Well, you need a video of what training hard looks like. I'll send you my videos, because I'll tell you right now, I'm going to failure and I'm doing what needs to be done. So yeah, and I think that does trickle down and people do like it. And I've heard it from a lot of my athletes that, like, they love seeing how hard I train and how I am dialed in. It motivates them to be better, which for me, that's a win, right? If I can find another way to motivate my athletes, that's a win.
Love it, man. I love just the depth of your explanation there, Braeden. We're gonna kind of close it up here. I do want to ask you. I saw this on your coaching Instagram, and I saw this on your personal Instagram. This quote or this statement. I want you. Obviously, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I want you to expound on it. Why it's valuable to you in your coaching. It says mediocrity is a curse. Be elite. Why don't you expound a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of people just kind of go through their day-to-day lives wanting to just fit in and wanting to just kind of be middle of the pack. And as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I mean, this sport is full of extremes, and you're going to have to do things that are different from the ordinary to be extraordinary. And I think that's the best way to explain it is there's ordinary and there's extraordinary. And when you're mediocre, it's just holding you back from anything, and it's going to have physical implications, mental implications, you name it, because there's going to be a million things that you're beating yourself up for. Whereas when you step into the world of being elite and doing what elite people do, and if you look at the actual elites in the world, and I'm not saying the elites from like elitists per se, but like the people who are succeeding in every corner, there's trends and there's cues, and success leaves cues, and it's like none of them are doing ordinary things. They're all doing extraordinary things. They're pushing themselves in ways that nobody else is. And I'm a firm believer that if you want to achieve the extraordinary physique, you got to leave the mediocre behind, and you got to do things, in my words, that would be elite, right? So, and it goes further than that. Like, as you've seen, I mean, my brand is a wolf is our logo. And I'm a firm believer that, I mean, I'm a big fan of wolves, and I always have been. They're a pack animal, right? So they thrive and survive based on their pack. And I look at it like this: I couldn't survive without my athletes, and my athletes couldn't survive without me. And it's like we're there for each other. I'll ride for you, you ride for me, and we're going to take it right to the end. And we've seen great success with that so far, and it's that shine theory, right? And this is one of the things that those back end gentlemen that I had the opportunity to work with, and they've helped me so much. They bring on this shine theory, and it's like, if you shine, I shine, and if I shine, you shine. So we're always looking out for the greater good and helping those around us, and it comes full circle. So yeah, I think that's behind the brand and our message. That's the biggest thing. I don't want to work with people that are just, wanting to be mediocre and wanting to be kind of average. If that's who you are and you just want to be somebody who has a lot of balance in your life, and maybe you want to shave off 5 or 6 pounds, I'm not the coach for you, because I'm the guy that's going to push you hard and you're going to break. Versus if you're somebody who wants to win and you want to be elite, I'll push you and you'll respond. And I'm not an asshole. That doesn't mean I'm an asshole. It means I want the best for you, and I'm going to care about your goals as much as you care about your goals.
Excellent, man. All right, Braeden. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. It's a little bit earlier in the morning on your end than my end, but I greatly appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, just kind of giving us a little bit of insights in terms of bodybuilding, coaching, and just your life in general. So I really appreciate that. And then before I do a quick outro, Braeden, I just kind of want to give you the opportunity. I know I love what you've got right there. Maybe that's some of your marketing team or some of those guys you're talking about, but you've got your Instagram, your number, all the contact stuff is right there. As people are watching this on YouTube, but maybe somebody's just listening to this. So if you have any final thoughts, any final words, I'm going to turn it over to you. Give us your Instagram, give us any additional information, shout outs that you would like to share. I'll do a quick outro, and then I'll wrap up the conversation. So the platform is yours.
For sure. No, I want to thank you, my friend, for giving me the opportunity to come on here. You messaged me a couple of days ago, and I was super excited. Obviously, I've listened to some episodes. I've seen you've had Cam, you had my buddy John Effer on yesterday. So you're doing a great thing here. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and tell a little bit of my story, and giving us and our sport another avenue to just speak about some things is really cool. So thank you very much. In terms of social media, where you can reach me at, Braeden Miller Fit, so BraedenMiller Fit on Instagram. That's my personal page. And then we do have a team page as well. Like I said, I do have 6 coaches here on the team that I kind of mentor, and they do a hell of a job with athletes as well. And our team page is just at Team Miller Elite, TEAM Miller Elite. And you get all our coaches run that page together. So pretty cool stuff there. By all means, we're all taking on athletes too. I'm a little more selective with my roster. So if somebody ever wants to work with me, definitely hit me up. We can get you filled out an application and hop on a call and see if we're a good fit. But yeah, that's kind of all I got. I appreciate the opportunity here. And like I said, I mean, if somebody does want to reach out, by all means, I'm available. Hit me up. I'm actually leaving on Saturday for my honeymoon for a couple of weeks for the first time in many years, taking a little vacation. But I got a girl doing North Americans first. So we got a bikini athlete on stage tomorrow morning before we head off to Greece. So we're going to peak her and then hopefully land that plane and get ourselves a card. She's right there. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'm off to Greece in the evening tomorrow night. So.
All right, man. Love it. Thank you so much, Braeden. Okay.
Thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. You're very welcome. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you. I value all of you. And per the usual, the podcast would not exist if it weren't for all of you listening, subscribing, following on Instagram, and just being, faithful to continuing to come back and supporting the podcast. So thank you so very much to all of you. 2 quick things as we wrap up this great conversation with Braeden today. If you have not done so already, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And also, I would greatly appreciate it if you would take this episode with Braeden and share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Braeden, tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it. Also, when you guys share these episodes on your Instagram stories, it's just a great way for people to find the podcast that have never heard of Behind the Muscle podcast. They've never heard of Braeden, but they see you posting on your Instagram stories. They check out this episode. Maybe they check out another episode. They listen, they watch, they gain some information, they gain some knowledge. They're positively impacted in some way. And really that's my heart's desire, is we bring on these elite coaches, we bring on these elite athletes. They share their bodybuilding stories. Somebody's going to watch, somebody's going to listen, somebody's going to be positively impacted and be able to take that out into the world. And again, that's really what it's all about, just positively impacting people's lives through storytelling. So share this on your Instagram stories. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.